The PS2 was home to the most memorable JRPGs of all time, and in this list I will reveal the 15 best games in this prestigious category. The best ones all work fine on PCSX2, but some of the lesser-known titles, like Ark the Lad and Valkyria Profile 2, have minor graphical glitches in hardware mode. Switching to software mode removes these issues, but do you really want to play at native resolution? You can, but then the real console should offer a better experience, in my opinion. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's begin with the list.
Response levels are really good.
If we can maintain these levels, we'll have some great results soon.
As the first entry in the trilogy, Xenosaga plays off a few hundred years into the future after humanity has left Earth. The story is very linear, which is how I prefer it, and the combat is turn-based. Fighting can be on foot or in mech-based armor. The series was popular enough to receive its own anime adaptation, as well as a Nintendo DS port. If you're a fan of old-school anime like Robotech and Voltron, you may want to give this game a try. It's very interesting.
Usually I'd be pretty mad if someone just came barging in like that, but you're so cute, I'll make an exception this time.
Star Ocean Till the End of Time is another futuristic RPG, and it starts out with a more lighthearted tone, although things get more serious later, when the spaceship you're traveling in gets attacked. The characters are very unique and likable, and the story is engaging. Combat is real-time and somewhat similar to the Tales series, so if you're not into turn-based fighting, this may be for you. This is a graphically impressive game, and was the first in the series with fully 3D environments and characters.
Master Jack, this is Jasner Colton, Lord Chamberlain of Radiata.
Really?
Really? Jack, your manners...
Radiata Stories is a game filled with goofy characters and tongue-in-cheek humor. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but that's part of its charm. The world feels very lived-in and reactive. The main character can recruit NPCs in various ways, and gameplay has more depth than you might expect. Graphically, the game looks astounding, with an art style that has aged really well. While Radiata Stories isn't technically the best in this list, I spent the most time playing it, so take that for what it's worth. After Square Enix, Level 5 is probably the most prolific developer of JRPGs. You should remember that they went on to make Ni no Kuni for the PlayStation 3, so they've always been a talented studio. Rogue Galaxy had a massive scope, and was for a while Level 5's most ambitious game. It won several awards, although sales weren't nearly as successful as initially hoped. It probably failed because the PS2 was on its way out, having already been replaced by the PS3. Despite having 2 sequels, Suikoden III actually concludes the story arc for the entire series. What makes this game unique is that you play through chapters, and from 3 different character viewpoints, but they all have a common enemy. There is a related manga series of comics, and they were published in North America, as well as Japan.
Huh? Hey Yuki, look at that!
I told you, I'm a little busy right now!
Despite initially being about a boy wanting to fly his plane, Grandia III's story quickly evolves into a damsel-in-distress fantasy opera, with all the tropes that you can usually associate with such a Japanese RPG. I think the mistake that people make when judging Grandia III is to compare it with the first 2 games in the series. It's a very different experience, but it's certainly not bad at all. It has an above-average battle system, so there's certainly lots of fun to be had here. Kingdom Hearts is more action than RPG, yet it started one of the most successful Japanese franchises on the PS2. It's essentially a crossover between Square and Disney, but characters from both companies are used to create an original story in a fantasy universe. You play as Sora, who has to journey through several worlds to help Donald and Goofy find Mickey Mouse. He's also on a mission to rescue his own friends. Kingdom Hearts is one of the most celebrated series in video game history.
Who knows?
Working hard? So, how's he doing?
He went to bed a little while ago.
Persona 3 FES is actually the extended version of the original game, which had been released 1 year earlier. You take on the role of a high school student who joins a squad fighting supernatural enemies during the dark hour. Your character gets to raise or summon a persona, which is a manifestation of his inner self. The game is divided into 2 parts, starting with the journey, which mostly covers the entire year leading up to graduation, and the answer, which resolves major plot holes from the series.
There you are.
Shadow Hearts Covenant plays off during an alternate reality First World War and delves into cosmic horror as it mixes events from the past with the supernatural. It actually follows on from the previous game's bad ending. A key element of gameplay is the Judgment Ring. Represented as a disc with colored areas on its surface, the player's aim is to hit those areas as a pointer passes over them. The more accurate you are, the more damage you inflict on enemies. Covenant has become one of the most sought-after games on the second-hand market.
Thieves.
That was low, you know?
Square Enix pretty much dialed everything to 11 for the Kingdom Hearts sequel. The graphics were better, the story was more outrageous, and the new worlds were even better to explore. You'll notice that you start off with a different character though, called Roxas. He's the main protagonist during the prologue, but you will eventually switch back to Sora. There are some tweaks to gameplay as well, like the introduction of the drive gauge, which allows Sora to summon a special character.
Well, if it's going to be that way, then die!
Dark Cloud 2 was a spiritual successor to the first game, which was also called Dark Cloud, but it had a different story and characters. It also had much improved graphics and game mechanics when compared to the original. Unlike most action role-playing games in which the characters level up, weapons in Dark Chronicle attain absorption points with each kill. Once a certain number of points have been gained, the weapon is automatically leveled up. Weapons can also wear down over time and must be repaired. There's also the ability to recruit non-playable characters and rebuild the world outside the dungeons. Persona 4 was one of the last major exclusives for the PS2, and was re-released as Persona 4 Golden some years later for all platforms. It differs from Persona 3 in some major ways, like the setting, which is now in a small town instead of the big city. And the battle system has changed as well, allowing you more direct control over party members. I still think Persona 3 has a better final boss though, but there's no denying that number 4 is the better game.
Yes! Yes! Here we are.
Just to recap, we have 2 other level 5 games in this list. The first is Rogue Galaxy, the second is Dark Cloud 2, and the last one coming in 3rd place is Dragon Quest VIII. Incidentally, Dragon Quest VIII was the highest-selling PS2 game in Japan, and the first to be released in English. Square Enix had high aspirations for the game, and it actually exceeded expectations. One of the most endearing parts of Dragon Quest is the voice acting, which was some of the best ever in an English localized game. There's lots of sharp humor in the story, while somewhat simple when compared to previous entries in the series, is delivered really well.
Anybody there? Aaron!
Final Fantasy X was the last in the series to utilize turn-based combat. You play as Tidus, who witnesses the complete destruction of his city before being transported to a strange new world called Spira. There he learns what has happened to his father. Final Fantasy X won several major awards from Japan and America, including Best Role-Playing Game, Best Narrative-Driven Game, and Best Overall Game. And I'm sure some of you will be wondering what could possibly be better. It has to be Final Fantasy XII, which introduced several innovations to the series: an open world, a seamless battle system, a controllable camera, and hunting side quests, which allows the player to find and defeat increasingly difficult monsters in the game's open world. It was also the first not to include random encounters. Instead, you can choose to attack enemies or avoid them. Final Fantasy XII was graphically impressive, comparing well with PS3 games of the same era. The story wasn't quite on Final Fantasy X's level, but it was still really good, with a few twists keeping things interesting. All in all, this was peak RPG on the PS2, and perhaps Final Fantasy XII was the best game on the console. You tell me your opinion below in the comments section.